I'm Ari Melber, and you might want to kind of buckle up for this one. Our top story is the kind of scandal that has certainly ended political careers before: direct and blatant grifting or profiteering off of public office. President Trump has been doing this out in the open, hawking this virtual currency that you see here, that is sort of what they call a coin. Sometimes they call it a meme coin. The money, though, goes into his pocket. The buyers can remain secret, and Trump is getting hundreds of millions of dollars from this crypto scheme. There are calls now tonight for investigations into what critics say is the most brazen corruption in the actual history of the American presidency. One of the many scandals dogging this administration that also faces now sinking approval, rocky markets. What he might have gotten away with on day one may not be the case for day 101 or 110. Senators are demanding action now, noting this is worse than most campaign fundraising scandals. In campaign fundraising, there can be corruption questions. You can get in a lot of trouble, but that money goes to the campaign, right? It doesn't actually reach the politician directly.
This is not like he's hosting a fundraising event, this gala dinner that he has just announced. It's not like this money is going to go into his campaign or someone else's campaign. No, this money goes straight into Donald Trump's pocket.
Senator Schiff hitting that straightforward point. Meanwhile, reporters did press Donald Trump on this from his very first day of the second term.
I heard it was very successful. I haven't checked it. Where is it today?
You made a lot of money, sir.
How much?
Several billion dollars, it seems like, in the last several days.
Several billion? That's peanuts for these guys.
Trump referring to some of the rich people who were there, but of course, that's not the point. The billions was in the total market capitalization of the crypto. He's making, according to these accounts, hundreds of millions. Trump also had previously spent years deriding exactly this type of crypto plan as a scam, till he figured out, I guess, that he could make money off it. Trump is exploring getting billions more dollars from foreign investors in a family crypto firm. And those investors, in this case, would be drawing from government coffers, contributions by a foreign government to Trump's private venture. That's how the Times put it. The interest in this crypto is, at a minimum, suspicious, all of the foreign money swirling around, because the efforts appear to be to use it to get access to the government that you fund with your taxpayer dollars. If any money should be made here, which is a question whether the U.S. should be involved in this at all, but if it were fair, the money would go back into our national debt or your pocket, not his, because they want access to the White House, not just Donald Trump as a person. The new coin is not competitive, by the way, with more established currencies like Bitcoin, and that's another bad sign if you're looking at this as potential corruption, because people are buying the coin to get to Trump. And he knows that, inviting top holders of the crypto coins for private White House access. This is the actual ad that promises, again, if they spend enough, they might get dinner with Trump. Now, U.S. law bans foreign contributions to U.S. campaigns outright, which makes sense, right? We have democracy, which uses votes, and in our system, money matters as well. But we've never allowed foreign money to shape elections. And that makes good sense. When you think about the amount of money that foreign governments have as a budgetary matter, they could come into our system and buy a lot of ads and influence to pick the winner and then decide who runs our country for their benefit. Bad thing, right? That's why it's always been banned. And that's a rule Trump cannot change by one of these executive orders. But the crypto scheme is now offering a route for alternative foreign influence, the very thing I told you that would be a problem. The top Trump crypto buyers are likely foreign. That's what Bloomberg found based on data analysis. And the attempts to influence Trump are only growing. Take this trucking company, which actually is publicly saying they bought 20 million in Trump coins. That's more than they could legally donate to a candidate, by the way. And they say it's an effective way to advocate for fair, balanced, free trade between Mexico and the U.S., which is sort of corporate speak for, hey, we're giving all this money to you, Trump, so we want you to be fair to us. Now, I'm a couple minutes into this report, and I want to make one other point. And don't worry, if you don't like crypto or you're not interested in crypto, I will put it simply. Without doing any deep dive on cryptocurrency, I will tell you something you've probably heard about, that the established coins like Bitcoin, which is worth something to some people, they are functional. That doesn't mean they're going to be the future of money. Doesn't mean you have to like or use crypto. But for years, they've been functional. People use Bitcoin to trade goods, for example. And then some people make money off Bitcoin, some people don't. But that's what a functional coin looks like. And you can see probably where I'm going with this. The Trump coin is not functional. It doesn't work like that. It is, as a coin, dysfunctional. The vast majority of holders have been losing money on the coin, over 760,000. So who's making money on this coin? Only the insider elites at a much smaller number. Remember, 760,000 you see there, but the top of the CNBC headline, only 58 people or businesses holding crypto wallets of Trump coin have made money. Talk about the have and the have-nots. Trump affiliated entities are reaping $300 million in the trading fees alone. So regardless of what the coin's worth, they're making money every time people trade. Now, maybe some of those buyers are getting duped. Maybe they're MAGA fans who believe anything that Trump hawks. We know he's sold a lot of products, and they hope the coin would be more valuable. But the important point here for ethics, for government, is a lot of the other folks, they know they're losing money because they're not trying to make money, and they don't care what happens to the coin. They're fine losing money on the coin because the goal isn't functional to trade with a coin. The goal is to use the coin to access your government. Trump also trying to make it easier to commit basically crypto crimes and other schemes by dismantling the one federal unit we had in DOJ to deal with crypto fraud. So this is a big deal. If you're watching going, why haven't I heard more about this? Yeah, I agree. That's why it's our top story. And many different nights this year, this could have been the top story, but sometimes the markets and immigration, rule of law, Supreme Court, there's a lot of other stuff. But this is, I'm telling you, based on our reporting, the facts, the evidence we have, the multiple sources we've drawn on here thus far, this is a big deal. It's the type of grift, even if currently legal, that actually dwarfs most campaign finance scandals we've ever seen in this country. Now, Congress has not updated campaign laws to specifically address crypto, which is a very new thing. And by the way, lawyers who were trying to combat this in DOJ might develop rules. They might say maybe we should treat these crypto schemes as foreign contributions, make them illegal under interpreting this law as you apply it, if they wanted to catch that loophole. That's clearly not happening under Trump DOJ, as I showed you. But a little context tonight. Past presidents were absolutely hammered for more technical, minor campaign fundraising questions, including situations where, unlike the Trump grift, where none of the money went into the politician's pocket. And boy, at the time, did everyone take it seriously.
It's a great honor to spend a night at the White House, but for hundreds of people in the last 4 years, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue turned out to be the most expensive bed and breakfast in North America. They stayed and they paid. Whether the two are connected, you decide.
The Lincoln bedroom was never sold.
But White House documents, some in the president's own handwriting, indicate the Lincoln bedroom was at least on the market to major political donors.
There's a new twist this morning in the controversy over campaign fundraising. Documents show that Vice President Al Gore phoned at least 46 people from his White House office in 1995 and 1996 to solicit big donations to the Democratic National Committee.
This went on and on and on like that. That's just a little reminder. Republicans hammered it. They said it was a bad thing and that it raised questions about ethics and government and could you trust these people? And without diminishing that, because it was an important story, that's why I'm showing it to you, it was at a much more minor level because those were phone calls. The phone is legal, but the argument was they shouldn't have been made on a government phone line. And the sleepovers at the Lincoln bedroom were for money that went to campaign fundraising outlets. Again, you could patrol that, but the money never even reached the politician in question, President Clinton. Those are two stories there about Democrats. It's wrong when any party does it, of course, but other politicians have faced even stronger penalties, convictions and jail time for schemes that involved trying to personally get money tied to their government service. That includes Democrat Bob Menendez, convicted, or Democratic Governor Blagojevich, who got 14 years. for trying to sell Obama's vacant Senate seat. And by the way, in that case, he never actually got the money, certainly not hundreds of millions like the crypto laundering, but the fact that he tried to do it in exchange for a government benefit was enough to send him to prison for a long time. Footnote, Donald Trump pardoned and freed Blagojevich, even though he's from the other party, the Democratic Party, which makes you wonder what it is they agreed on. So that's a big story tonight. Then there's these business conflicts. President's sons are making more real estate deals in different continents. All of this in these first 100 days, benefiting from the apparent power of the Trump presidency. It's a contest of sorts, the Times reports, across continents, a blitz of family money-making ventures that capitalize on their father's name and power. The new buildings planned for across the world and a club in Washington. Eric Trump was just in the Middle East last week discussing one of these models of a Trump family business plan. Billions in deals months after Trump takes office. And the question for anyone saying, well, aren't they allowed to do business is, where were these deals in the last 4 years when they didn't have your government and tax dollars behind them? And then there's the market and recession context to all this. People are afraid that the economy will get worse. Warning signs of a recession. Americans struggling to get by. Trump telling everyone, tighten your belt, buy less dolls, yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, he and his family are not only enriching themselves, but doing so on your government tax dollar. Trump is headed, we should mention, to 3 of the Middle Eastern countries where the sons have been making these deals next week. Again, it's conflicts on conflicts on conflicts. So the question tonight is, if this was a big deal in the 90s and none of the money went to the politician, why doesn't it feel like as big a deal today? And can that be changed if this is a democratic society that still wants the government to look out for you more than it profits for its temporary inhabitants? I got 2 special guests on that when we're back after the break.
I believe in cryptocurrencies. I believe that cryptocurrencies are the future. He wants to make America the crypto capital of the world.
Here we go. I'm joined now by New School economics professor Derek Hamilton, who's advised Democratic members of Congress, including Bernie Sanders, and ethics expert Richard Painter, chief White House ethics lawyer in the George W. Bush administration. Richard, good to have you back. We thought of you because this is a rolling scandal. What is your view of it?
This is massive corruption. And shouldn't be a partisan issue. I was very critical during the Biden administration about the shenanigans involving Hunter Biden and also the way the University of Pennsylvania raised money around the world using President Biden's name. But none of that compares, none of that comes close to what we have going on here, where the President of the United States and his family are issuing their own cryptocurrency, running trading platforms, money flowing in from all over the world into Trump crypto ventures at a time when the President of the United States and Congress need to focus on regulating cryptocurrency. If there's one thing we should have learned from the collapse of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried's corruption of Washington, and he had connections in both political parties in Washington. If there's one thing we should have learned from FTX, is that this is an unregulated industry with some crooks involved in the industry and volatile asset prices. If we don't regulate crypto, we're going to have another financial collapse coming out of these.
No, you make an important point, because it's the federal government that is normally supposed to patrol that, and now they look more like they're on the side with the scammers. So you're reminding people how this could affect them. Stay with me, Richard. Derek, I told folks we're not going to do a whole primer on crypto here, but there are some coins that people use to trade stuff. The Trump coin is not that kind of coin. Everyone's, quote, losing money because they don't seem to care about that. A lot of the users seem to just want to use this to get around ethics rules.
And it's in plain sight. When you announce that whoever is one of the top purchasers of the coin will get access to me at a private dinner, that's in plain sight. And as you accurately described, for foreign governments, as well as individuals, it's a mechanism to get access around some of the laws that we have to protect access.
Yeah. Richard, you've been known to hold the line. This is what we know about you. I've known you a few years now professionally. And I'm curious what you think about where that fits in. I want to play you something Rachel Maddow, our colleague, said, because some of these things crop up and the Trump folks want to say, hey, nothing matters. We're going to get away with it anyway. And you shouldn't even try. And then you find sometimes they actually run into a brick wall. Here's how Rachel put it.
People push back on these things. Republican senators and members of Congress can't defend what Trump is doing. And so then they start to push back against Trump on it as well. And then Trump caves. That's what we've learned over the 100 days. That's the system. It's not a great system, but it's a system.
Do you view these ethics and crypto issues under that umbrella, that people should hold the line and say it's not okay?
Well, nobody's holding the line right now. I think the last administration in which ethics was taken very seriously was the Obama administration. But this is unprecedented. The corruption that we've seen in the second Trump administration, unprecedented in our history. Even the first Trump administration had nowhere near as much corruption. Yes, we fear that foreign emoluments, payments from foreign governments that are unconstitutional, will come into the president's business empire in the first Trump administration. But now he has a vastly expanded business empire that includes cryptocurrency, which is ideal for money laundering and for payment of bribes. I'm not saying that the president is receiving bribes, but if he doesn't want the American people to think he's taking bribes, why is he selling his own cryptocurrency, his own meme coin? Why isn't he focusing on the business of the country? He already has billions of dollars. Is he in this position just to make more money, or does he want to serve the American people? And I think he's telling us very clearly that he's in it for himself.
And Richard, an honest, fair, nonpartisan DOJ, would they have an obligation to look at this, to investigate whether, even if we don't know what's in, of course, the president's mind, whether foreign entities are trying to abuse this, to meddle, to interfere, to curry favor, and don't some of the current laws properly interpreted try to combat that?
Well, absolutely. The Justice Department should be investigating any attempt by foreign governments to influence the United States. But DOJ has announced that they are actually going to cut back on enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938 that was passed by Congress to keep Nazi influencers from being able to infiltrate our country. The Justice Department is too busy investigating Democrats, investigating law firms for daring to represent Democrats. So I don't see that the DOJ is going to do its job. Congress also needs to investigate. This should be a bipartisan investigation. We need everybody on board to make sure that foreign governments are not able to infiltrate our government with cash payments to the President of the United States or to any other public official. Cryptocurrency is a money laundering vehicle, and they're asking for trouble here.
Yeah. And Derek, you've worked with, as I mentioned, advising members of Congress. They may not get the Republicans to back all the subpoenas, but this would be a ripe area for Democrats to investigate, to do reports, to put pressure even on private citizens here or abroad, because this seems to be inviting corruption.
And as Richard described, this should be bipartisan. There's one thing, the grifting individually that Trump is getting out of this fiasco, but it's the vulnerability of the American people to his actions is really what should be at concern at its utmost. And, trying to get rid of CFPB in this context where you're grifting with largely unregulated currency, to manipulate your own riches, when in fact we should be worried about the potential speculation that comes from these type of things and the vulnerability of our economy. We've seen the Great Recession and what a speculative bubble can do to our economy.
Yeah. Derek Hamilton, Richard Painter, my thanks to both of you. I want to tell folks what's coming up. We have filmmaker Ava DuVernay on tonight live by the end of the hour. Outrage, meanwhile, over this Trump plan to use government airwaves to broadcast OAN and Matt Gaetz and the like. But first, another legal loss, a breakdown for you straight ahead. Donald Trump facing more court losses. A New York judge found the Trump administration's use of this wartime law to deport migrants is illegal, and referencing the evil jail that some have mistakenly ended up in. This comes on the heels of other rulings in Colorado and Texas, where a Trump appointee continued down the road that the Supreme Court had set, basically saying we're not at war with these countries and you can't claim those wartime powers. Now, why are we finding out about this? Some of these things were kind of under the cover of darkness. They were trying to sneak them out on planes. Well, it's partly because of groups like the ACLU that monitor, track, and file these emergency lawsuits. It's hard work. And we just heard from the ACLU's lead attorney in the case that's stopping Trump on some of this stuff. Here's what he told us.
The federal judiciary are very serious people, and you can get into the whole sort of partisan thing. But if you push too far against these basic principles that they believe in, they will push back. If you're going to claim no due process whatsoever, then you're going to get pushback from us.
The Trump administration is not, however, bringing back Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They admit it was a mistake to send him to El Salvador. The Supreme Court basically ordered him back, but left the door open by saying they had to facilitate his release, a word that has not yet resulted in the administration thinking that they must do so. Now, this is not a one-off, because if they are allowed to get away with this, of course, they can continue to do so. And we're learning of a second wrongly deported individual. The Post reporting a judge ordering the Trump administration to, here's that word again, facilitate the return of another man deported in violation this time of a settlement. Standing her ground after Trump officials tried to argue that retrieving him was basically pointless because he wouldn't get asylum anyway. If you follow that line of logic, that's your government saying, well, we'll just throw you out. And then, maybe we don't have to bring you back because it's pointless. Not very comforting. What you see on your screen is the overview. You don't have to read every word. Follow the red X's. It's one way we're helping you keep track, because the Trump immigration court fiasco is a heck of a lot of losing for Donald Trump. Now, we've got a lot coming up tonight. I mentioned acclaimed filmmaker Ava DuVernay will be here by the end of the hour. But first, the MAGA makeover for your government radio airwaves, something you need to know about that's going down at the Voice of America. One of the long-standing tools of the United States around the world is Voice of America. You may remember it for Cold War broadcasts, or, like a lot of people, you might not have thought about it for a while. But now the Trump administration wants to twist Voice of America because they have a MAGA-type official now overseeing it, announcing it will start airing political content from a fairly conservative outlet, OAN. Now, again, that's a huge shift for a broadcaster that was founded all the way back in the Cold War era, not to pick sides in America's domestic political disputes, right, running this or that program, but rather to put forward a pro-democracy and pro-Western American kind of view to counter what was then seen as the threat of communist propaganda around the world, including east of the Iron Curtain and in places that were hard to reach. Now it is run by a longtime sort of Trump aide, supporter, and lawyer, Christina Bobb. She's a correspondent. Excuse me, I should say, well, I'm about to show you. Former Trump lawyer Christina Bobb was a correspondent with OAN. And what's important here that I want to flag, and I'll let you see it yourself, is how on that channel they discuss misinformation about Trump's 2022 election loss.
The fact is that Donald Trump won a second term last night.
I'm most concerned about the many multifaceted efforts the Democrats are making to steal the vote.
Democrats are tossing Republican ballots, harvesting fake ballots, and delaying the results to create confusion.
100,000 that were just concocted, drafted up that night. Biden votes that were all counted after the Republicans left.
People care about honest elections, and they're tired of having their elections stolen.
That may have endeared the channel to the Trump administration, but it's raised all kinds of questions and problems. We can tell you now, Voice of America reporters battling the Trump administration over whether this is even legal, fighting an executive order that they view as essentially dismantling the outlet and its heritage. I'm joined now by Steve Herman, Chief National Correspondent at Voice of America and spokesman for one of the plaintiffs in the suit, so we want people to know where you're coming from. I mentioned the history. We can't do it all justice for decades, but people do remember Voice of America in that realm, and not so much as a way that any administration would do political programming domestically. What's your view of this most recent news?
This is very disturbing. This would violate the law. We have a firewall which prevents interference from any other government agency into Voice of America programming. It also would violate the charter, which says we have to present a fair and balanced view of the United States, American thought and institution. OAN obviously doesn't do that. And I would say also, Ari, no offense, if someone came along and said VOA should only air MSNBC programming, we would object to that as well.
Right.
So,
I'll jump in. I mean, whatever equivalencies people want to make about all the different programs out there, because there are a lot of other reputable outlets that would say OAN is not very comparable to MSNBC, for example, when it comes to accurately covering elections. Your point being, this has never been a place to just push certain chosen political programming. And now that's what they want. How does that conflict with, you mentioned the charter, how does that conflict with what Voice of America is supposed to do?
well, for 83 years until mid-March, uninterrupted, we were telling America's story to the world. And that doesn't mean just telling the president's story. Whatever party is in power, we have to be balanced. The president says something, he does something. We go and talk to people on Capitol Hill who like it or don't like it. We talk to non-governmental organizations, rights groups, whatever. That's the way it's always been done, and that's the way it has to continue to be done. And that's why we're in court fighting all of this.
What are you asking the courts to do as a remedy?
We want the Voice of America restored to the way it was before March 15th. That means broadcasting in television, radio, online, social media apps in 49 languages, including English and learning English. There was 2,300 plus hours of programming per week in those 49 languages, reaching an audience of 340 million people around the world. Right now, the audience is 0. There is no programming. Perhaps they want to return VOA to what they consider to be a statutory minimum. We're not exactly sure what that is, and maybe have a tiny bit of programming or put something on the web in a few languages. That's not going to be acceptable, and that's not what 2 federal judges have determined so far should be what the U.S. Agency for Global Media is doing with VOA.
Yeah, understood. Steve Herman, helping us kind of take a look at what's going on there with this clash with Voice of America and why you think you'll be able to potentially prevail in the courts. All very interesting. Appreciate you joining tonight.
Thank you, Ari.
Absolutely. We're going to fit in a break. There is a clash about history in the Smithsonian Institution. Trump administration officials want to rewrite history, while Ava DuVernay is headed to the Smithsonian tomorrow. She's my special guest next, and we'll explain. Political conservatives have long complained about Hollywood and American pop culture. Go back to the 90s, you had Republicans arguing that sitcoms like Murphy Brown were undercutting traditional family values or the role of fathers because of a fictional portrayal of a single parent as a choice. These days, we have other complaining that's been rebooted for Disney or even M&M's, conservatives saying that there's an alleged kind of wokeness, that liberal agendas are being woven into what sometimes seem like random topics, even candy. Now you have MAGA conservatives who want to actually use federal power to control culture more, and sometimes even history itself. Now, Republicans now have a party that's organized itself around a leader who came from inside entertainment. Trump was best known as a reality TV host, eager for any movie cameos and TV show cameos like you see right there. This unbridled second-term Trump is going after culture, trying to reshape the leadership of the Kennedy Center. That itself has drawn protests from artists and past honorees. Trying to defund PBS by alleging that it has bias. That was in a new order this week, which follows attacks on funding for the arts at the National Endowment. And then There's America's iconic Smithsonian. That's the Washington building there, a huge tourist attraction. It's a nonpartisan bastion of American learning. It's now been targeted in a Trump order that claims to combat materials that the Trump administration deems to be improper ideology. Now, this is not just one more thing about scoring political points. I'm going to show you the evidence of why this actually is important. Because it looks like a wider effort to corrupt and shape history itself and what's in Americans' minds. Again, by the government. The Trump order talks about its view of truth and sanity for American history, and then it gets specific. So let me show you what they say. Then you can use your mind to make up your mind. They critique a Smithsonian exhibit about race and American sculpture as, quote, divisive because it portrays American values as inherently harmful, critiquing the exhibit for stating, quote, the U.S. has used race to establish and maintain systems of power and disenfranchisement. Okay. It's a historical fact that U.S. systems, from slavery to Jim Crow to voter suppression, have maintained racial systems of power and disenfranchisement. That's what happened. That's the history. We're talking about museums where you have historical artifacts. And that's the example that Trump folks came up with. That's what they want to rebut. It's very telling. The Smithsonian work, of course, it goes on. They're curating exhibits for what are sometimes millions of visitors a year. And they're honoring cultural icons with the Great Americans Medal. Tomorrow, director, filmmaker, and writer Ava DuVernay will be honored there as well.
It is unacceptable that they use their power to keep us voiceless.
We are in search of warriors.
So difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized.
Warriors who serve the good and the light and the universe.
That's some of her work. And when you look at this clash over history at the Smithsonian, we reach for a wise political observer and writer, George Orwell, who famously warned, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. I'll leave that up for a second because what he meant was by controlling our understanding of history, you can control politics of the future. And of course, if you have power today, you might control that past. A deep thought for a troubled time. We're joined by Ava DuVernay. Her new Substack, Onward, launches tonight. We're happy to share that artistic news as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Great to have you. We'll get to your honor and everything else, but let's start with that Orwell observation. We've all heard the term Orwellian, and what's happening at the Smithsonian, because I took a look at the administration's arguments, as we always do, to see if they have merit, to see what examples they had. But their example was that accurate history about racial oppression itself, they say, should be removed.
Yes, I mean, I actually take great solace in actually reading these executive orders because their level of absurdity actually calms me. It reminds me that we're being gaslit. It reminds me about the chaos that is being stirred through the very language to say that there's a restoration of truth and sanity. And then when you actually read that order, it is it's laughable. And to do that helps me kind of cut through the emotion of it because I'm an artist, I'm an emotional person, to really kind of pierce through that and look for what's real within it. And what's real in these documents is history. It comes to life in the executive orders because within the executive orders, we are reminded of that same language in the past and how that turned out. And so by actually reading it myself, not just, getting a synopsis or a summary on the news, I felt fortified in the fact that what we're hearing is nonsense and really trying to create some steps forward for myself as an artist and the people around me.
I like that. I like what you're kind of reminding us, which is it can be upsetting or befuddling, but sometimes just actually taking it in and saying, oh, that's how thin the argument is. And there's still a world out here of people who care about facts, history, and the arts, which brings us to you being honored tomorrow, which is one of our hooks for getting you back tonight. What does that mean to you? What's tomorrow about for you?
I think it's grown in importance to me since I heard about it, and obviously deeply honored. But as the institution has been under fire, I feel like they could have probably made a much easier choice, another choice that
Mm-hmm.
might not have raised eyebrows. Certainly, I've been vocal about my feelings about the administration, and they've held strong to their selection of me for this honor. So I commend them. I thank Dr. Lonnie Bunch and all the good people at the Smithsonian overall and the National Museum of American History. And so, yes, I'm excited to be there. I certainly know that the folks that run these institutions who care deeply about justice and dignity are under fire, and so these are allies who need to know that artists stand in solidarity with them. So I'm proud to be there tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow. Speak on the influence and the power of culture, because it's something we've taken an interest in here on the beat. And I don't know what it means when people meet up on it, but at a certain point you say, oh, if this film or this song, right, has all these fans and people love it, and then it has all these opponents and enemies who hate it. They hate it so much they don't want it to exist. To me, that sometimes reinforces that culture is powerful. And when we look at the many American traditions, but which includes a lot of homemade Black art that seems to matter, or even, I should say, numerically might punch above its weight, the weight of jazz or blues above its numerical representation, right? What do you see there at a time like this?
Well, jazz and blues and African American art over indexes from its origins to its echoing and reverberations through the culture. But overall, the impact of art on the culture is priceless. It's seismic. And that is why it's under fire. If you can shut up the artists, if you can make us look away from history, then you do, as the quote that you stated before, you do control minds, you control the moment. And so what is important is for artists to continue to create. All art is homemade and handmade. It's heart made. And it comes from someone who expresses their point of view about the human condition. And whether that's political, cultural, whether it's about your lineage, whether it's about what's happening in the White House, it's coming from a deep place of human expression. It must be. It's different than news. It's different than anything that is objective, because art is deeply emotional. It's from
It's better than news, I'll tell you that.
I'm not going there, Ari, but we can battle if you want. But it all has its place, and I think, for me, as a student of history, I know there's so many examples of moments where art has really lifted the national mood when it's actually propelled us forward, and we're back to that place, and it's important that we continue to do our work.
I have a question for you about political projection, and then we saved a little time to talk Met Gala, so we can end on a high note. But, it's always interesting with projection because, we try to be fair here. We talked to a lot of folks. I've had Trump folks on the show, and I'll have them back on the show. But the political projection I see is a part of the MAGA right saying, you guys are obsessed with race. You're obsessed with identity. You're fixated. And then you go and you look at these orders and you look at the targeting, you look at what's going on, and you go, I'm sorry, who's obsessed? There's more than one way to do diversity recruitment. America's had a multi-decade debate about recruitment for action programs. You can look at the Fortune 100 and say, it's still 90% male CEOs, give or take. Does that seem right, or are we getting something wrong? We can debate it. But the whole obsessive thing, I wanted to ask you about that. And the headline from The Atlantic on the threats to the African American History Museum, which talks about how Black resistance has always existed, the exhibit reminding people that existence is possible now, which is the exact sort of thing that's led authoritarian regimes to scrub examples of political resistance. What do you think of that projection issue?
Well, that's the wonderful piece by Clint Smith in The Atlantic. If you haven't read it, folks should. The idea that what I'm often called online by the trolls and I imagine young men in their mother's basements sitting in their briefs, is a race baiter. And but when you look at the executive orders and you look at almost every time Trump or the blonde woman who is at the podium doing something in the press room, she thinks, speaks, they are talking about race. This administration is obsessed with race. That whole side of things is obsessed with race. This is part of the gaslighting, whether it's immigration, whether it's black folks, it's brown folks, it's Muslims, it's people in the Middle East. It's this idea that, you know, the other is
it's everyone else.
Is everyone else. And so
No, I promised the photos. So this is a TV thing where I'm going to put them up just so we see. I know you were at the Met Gala.
You're not cutting me off.
Well, talk to
about
us.
Race to show these gowns. Sorry.
I mean,
okay.
Hey, it's your time. You get 45 seconds. We do have the photos.
This is a garment that is made as a replica, a bedazzled replica of something that my great-grandmother Annie Fisher wore in a portrait in 1999. Shout out to all the beautiful Black designers and folks who came together to break a record for the Met Gala, and I was happy to be there. Also, I'll probably talk about it more on my new Substack later in the week. But Ari, are you going to invite me back so we can talk more about real things?
We've been talking about real things. Real talk, real things. I would love to invite you back. We will have you back within the next, let's say, 2 weeks, if you're willing. And congrats on the new Substack newsletter. People can Google Ava DuVernay Substack. And thanks for being here.
Thanks, friend. Take care.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks for watching The Beat.